You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, where men of fantasy genius have realized, hey guys, we don't need real football skills to dominate on the fantasy field. Yeah. So slap on your pads and grab your helmet. Shit's about to get real.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I am your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh, and I am here for part one of the Week 15 preview. I'm going to get you guys through the first 8 games of the week. For part 2, you will have Nick Schreck coming back at you. If you missed our Thursday night preview, probably a little bit too late because I am recording this towards the end of the Thursday night game. I watched most of the Thursday night game. Lamar Jackson had an incredible game for me. I am very happy about that. I had in the different leagues that I'm still alive in, which is 5 out of 6. I'm still there in 5 out of 6 leagues, still doing pretty well. But in 2 of them, I had Mark Ingram, pretty solid. In one of them, I had Marquise Brown, and that got the job done. And in the other one, I had Lamar Jackson. So pretty happy with the results of the Thursday night game. If you had a little Robbie Anderson, you're probably pretty happy with yourself too. Right now, timing-wise, Robert Griffin III just came in that game, so I decided, you know what, I don't need to watch this anymore. I think I can record this podcast, get it done before the night's over and before I get too drunk, because I've been drinking through these games a little bit. Not too heavy, but we're cruising all right here. All right, guys, like I said, I've got 8 games here. I'm going to get you right on into it. I'm going to start with Tampa Bay at Detroit. Tampa Bay is a 3.5-point favorite here. The over-under is 46. On the Tampa Bay side, Jameis has a thumb issue, but he's expected to play. I am all systems go on Jameis. He had a great game this past week, great fantasy performance. So I expect the same sort of thing here. I think if you have Jameis, you're absolutely rolling him out here. If he's still on your waiver wire for whatever reason, please go pick him up unless you have a better matchup. But yeah, Jameis is still the dude, even with Mike Evans out. It's potentially for the season, though there have been conflicting reports there, so I don't want to give you a definite either way. But yeah, this Detroit defense is a great matchup for the pass game. So we're looking with Mike Evans out at, what should be a 3 wide receiver set of Chris Godwin, obviously, and then Brashad Perryman and Scotty Miller. So I know we saw Justin Watson get 8 targets this past week. He may be a guy who's been touted to you as a good pickup. With Scotty Miller coming back, I would not buy it. It's possible Watson gets the nod over Miller, but there's been nothing that's happened while Miller's been healthy this year to make us think that would be the case. Miller's been out the past 2 weeks. He was inactive this past game. So even though he got a lot of targets, I don't think it's worth playing him at all. I think at the very best, he's in a timeshare with Miller and Perriman. So, Godwin, obviously a great play. You're firing him up no matter what. This is a spectacular matchup. If you have him in this matchup, you should be pumped. Perriman and Miller, I think, are both potential streamers. They're sort of desperation plays. I wouldn't be going out of my way to play either one of them, but I also wouldn't be really upset. I'd rather play Perriman than Miller just because I know he's 100% healthy. Honestly, I'd really rather that Miller was still just out so you could be sort of confident in Perriman and Watson. With the running backs, I don't trust either one. Peyton Barber got a little bit more of the snaps and work this past week. Dare Ogunbowale is still working in there. I don't think it's worth it, even though it's a good matchup, to really try and play whack-a-mole with this backfield unless you absolutely have to. And then the last player here that we need to talk about is O.J. Howard. He's seen an increased role in recent weeks, getting over 80% of the snaps. He did have 5 targets this past week. With Evans out, I think he could see an increase in targets. I don't mind him as a tight end streamer play. But if you're in the playoffs, you're probably not really scrounging around for this kind of play. If you are, then yeah, by all means, use O.J. Howard. The Lions' pass defense and defense in general is bad. And we expect Howard to maybe see a bit more of the target share with Mike Evans out. For the Lions, David Blau looked really good for 1 half against the Bears. And since then, he's looked pretty much like an undrafted rookie, which is what he is. Now, Tampa Bay's pass defense has been a sieve for most of the year, but over the past couple of weeks, they've been a lot better. So I'm not necessarily targeting this game, and I don't think Blau is a guy that you should be looking at as a streamer. That being said, the wide receivers are all potentially good plays. Galladay, Jones, and Amendola, they're all viable. This past week, I'm pretty sure Galladay and Amendola had 8 targets. Jones had 7. Over the past 4 weeks, Jones has led in target share and air yards. Galladay's been the best deep threat, and Amendola has been the target underneath. So, look, probably 2 out of these 3 guys are going to pop this week. I'm not going to try and predict which ones it's going to be. If I had to choose in order, it would be Galladay, then Jones, then Amendola. The running backs in this matchup, none of them are good plays because Scarborough has been pretty solid, but he's not used at all in the pass game. This is a good rush defense, and he also has a bit of an injury issue. So I'm not really looking to, I'm not trying to put in like J.D. McKissick or any bullshit like that. Just stay away completely if you absolutely can. I'm going to take Tampa Bay in this game. I think Jameis kicks a little bit of ass. Again, if this is your first time with me on a solo podcast, the longer pauses are most likely not your podcast app fucking up. It's most likely me drinking some of my beer. Denver at Kansas City. Kansas City here is a 9.5-point favorite. The over-under is 45.5. This past week, Drew Lock really shocked the world. He played really well against the Texans, but the Texans are a bad defense, and Kansas City's pass D is 6th in DVOA this year. They're pretty good. I don't think you need to get to Lock. I don't think you should get to Lock. And I don't really think you should get to most of his pass-catching targets. This past week we saw Noah Fant kind of go off, but he only had 4 catches. He got it on 4 targets. He was limited in practice today, and Jeff Hireman is back, so he's only running a certain percentage of the snaps. To me, Noah Fant, you're staying off of him. I said that last week, and I know it worked, but I'm not going back to it this week. It needs a big play to happen. That's what happened last week. Cortland Sutton is the only pass catcher that I'm really looking to. He's really, really good, and he's getting the most targets. He had 7 this past week. He's a guy that you can rely on, and really the only person along with potentially Phillip Lindsay that I would rely on in this offense. So going to Phillip Lindsay, he's gotten the lion's share of the carries these past couple of weeks. I believe it's been 70-32 over Royce Freeman in the past 4 weeks. Sorry. It's possible that he gets game scripted out of this if the Chiefs go way up very early and they just don't give him the ball. But to me, Lindsay is worth the start because I think Denver's defense can keep them in this game at least a little bit. And that means Lindsay's going to get the ball against a run defense that's really been pretty bad. They've given up over 5 yards per carry to the opposing team. So Lindsay, I'm in on. Sutton, I'm in on. That's about it for the Broncos. Now, despite the fact that the Chiefs are a 9.5-point favorite at home, I really don't think there's a ton of players that you want to go to here. And we've talked about this with the Chiefs in the past, but the running back situation here is just tough to deal with. It's a 3-way committee between McCoy, the newly signed Spencer Ware, who did have a role this past week, and then Darwin Thompson. I'm not going to try and predict this nonsense. It's not worth it. You should be looking elsewhere if you absolutely can. The only guys on this team that I want to start are Patrick Mahomes, who, he's sort of a name value start at this point. He hasn't really lived up to it, but still, I don't think you're benching him. If you made the playoffs with Patrick Mahomes as quarterback, I'm not benching him as a 9.5-point favorite in Arrowhead in week 15. And then it's obviously Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Those are the guys who are getting the targets. They're the best pass catchers there. They're both blow-up games waiting to happen, despite the fact that it hasn't happened a ton this year. And then the other guy getting targets is Sammy Watkins, and we know he hasn't done shit with them this year. So to me, it's just Mahomes, Hill, and Kelce on the Chiefs side of the ball. That's all I'm going after. I'm going to take the Chiefs to really kind of put Drew Lock in his place on this one. I think they cover that spread as well as winning the game. Moving on to the Houston Texans at the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee is a 3-point favorite here. The over-under is 47.5. And Houston's offense, I think, is really tough to predict at this point in time because it's really hinged on Will Fuller's ability to stretch the field while he's been in there. And Fuller appears to be a true game-time decision going into this week. So we're not going to know. We're not going to go we're not going to know what capacity he's going to be used in. So, it's tough to really make informed decisions on the Texans offense at this point in the week, which is Thursday night. That being said, Deshaun Watson is clearly a start here. He's currently fantasy's quarterback 2 behind only Lamar Jackson. And this Tennessee team is 5th in DVOA against the run, but 23rd against the pass. So they can be passed on. I like Deshaun Jackson. Jesus, what am I doing? To really have a good game here. And, even if Fuller is out, to sort of pepper DeAndre Hopkins underneath and maybe get some targets to some other players that we'll talk about in a minute here. Now, I mentioned Hopkins. With Fuller out, he's seen a huge bump in targets. And while his ceiling hasn't really been there this year, he just caught 2 touchdowns this past week. He's obviously a guy that you're getting in there. I think Kenny Stills has shown that he doesn't really benefit from any sort of differences in this offense. He sort of is what he is. And that's a guy who's on the field and not getting targeted. Now, this past week, a guy who fell back into favor with the coaching staff after falling out early in the year was Kiki Cutie. He got back on the field for 72% of the snaps. He saw 8 targets. They threw the ball 50 times, so I don't want to overemphasize this. I mean, that's still less than 20% of the targets. But we know Kiki Cutie's been used heavily in past years. It's possible he could be used again. At the very most, I think he's a sneaky DFS play. But even then, I think that's kind of weak because he generally lives in the slot. Tennessee has been worse on the outside than they have been against the slot. Now at running back, I mentioned that Tennessee is a very good run defense. They're 5th in DVOA against the run. So to me, Carlos Hyde is not an optimal play. And Duke Johnson, despite getting 8 targets last week, remember they were in garbage time a lot of the time. That's going to lead to underneath targets. And he only got 8 targets even in garbage time. That's still less than 20%. So to me, neither of these running backs are solid plays. I am not trying to go after either of them. With Tennessee, though, I think there's reason to be optimistic. Now, I've been banging the drum that Tannehill is going to regress at some point, and he clearly is. I mean, the guy threw 3 touchdowns on 27 attempts this past week. His touchdown percentage has been hovering around 10% for the past couple weeks. That's not something that's sustainable. In Patrick Mahomes' record-breaking season last year, his was just over 8%. So I'm not saying that Tannehill is going to keep doing what he's doing, but he doesn't need to in order to be a usable quarterback this week. He just needs to have a good game against Houston, which he absolutely can. This is a bad defense. So Tannehill, to me, is just fine. A.J. Brown, even though he's only getting somewhere from 5 to 7 targets a week, he's talented enough where you can make that work. You can make that be a viable start. And again, Houston's defense is bad. And then, of course, Derrick Henry, he's a no-brainer. It's Derrick Henry in December against a bad defense. What more do you need? The guy's a stud. I'm going to take Tennessee in this one, and I'm going to take them to cover. All right, last game before we move to the break, we're going to talk about the Miami Dolphins at the New York Giants. So the Giants are a 3.5-point favorite here, which is a little surprising to me. The over-under is 46.5. I really want to roll out Ryan Fitzpatrick pretty much everywhere that I can. The only issue right now is I'm not sure how healthy his weapons are. So Fitzpatrick had a great week this past week. He's quietly had a pretty solid fantasy year for the most part. He's a guy I've used a lot on DraftKings, and now I'm trying to bank into a couple, fantasy championships, honestly. In leagues where I've been playing Darnold, I have now moved to Fitzpatrick because he gets the Giants this week, the Bengals next week. I might reevaluate next week, but we'll see. The issue, I think, is that Devontae Parker, Albert Wilson, they are both still in the concussion protocol. And obviously Parker is the more important of these two. But, I think they're both useful receivers and at least receivers that make the offense better as a whole. Allen Hurns got a full practice in today, so he is likely to play. I mean, we'll see what happens with him and Isaiah Ford, who's the guy who came in and replaced Parker on the outside. He had 8 targets, I believe, this past week and did pretty well. So if Parker doesn't go, Isaiah Ford is definitely a desperation consideration. What a rhyme. I'm doing great there. But yeah, I'm leaning towards doing this because fuck it. He's Ryan Fitzpatrick. He likes to throw the ball around. he's going to keep doing it. He'll run it too. And it's the Giants defense. They're bad. They're not good. I know they've gotten better on the defensive line, but unless something happens that really changes my mind going forward, and I mean, hopefully I don't even have to think about it. Hopefully Parker gets cleared and everything, but I think I'm still rolling Fitz out pretty much everywhere. I'm willing to ride him, and I'm willing to ride him in leagues where I'm in the semifinals. So that shows you my confidence in Ryan Fitzpatrick, because he's playing like he doesn't give a fuck right now, and that's how you want Ryan Fitzpatrick to play. At running back, Patrick Laird has not been efficient, but that guy has gotten usage. This past week, he was in on 82% of the snaps. He had 15 carries for 48 yards and added 4 catches on 5 targets for 38 yards. So yeah, I'm in on it. I just said the Giants defense and their defensive line have been better. They've been better against the run since they traded for Leonard Williams from the Jets. But look, Laird's getting enough usage right now to make him a starter. How many other places are you going to get 18 touches? Not too many. So yeah, like I'm in. Another guy that I am starting in several playoff leagues this week. So if I'm in on it, I got skin in the game. If I'm wrong, I'm losing 2 guys. So if you lose because of Laird or you lose because of Fitz, I'm sorry, but know that I'm losing 2 on it. Mike Gesicki this past week, he's been pretty consistent. He had a real down game. He had 1 catch on 5 targets. Still don't think it's really something to worry about. There might be smoke to the fire of Parker going down and then Gesicki drawing more of the coverage. So I think you're more confident if Parker does go. But I mean, look, this guy's been good for several weeks straight. I don't think now is the time to get off of him at the New York fucking Giants. On the Giants side of the ball, it's looking like Daniel Jones might come back. I'm not really sure. But to me, this is really a game where you can play almost all the Giants. It's a situation where if Jones plays, like, yeah, they're against the Dolphins. Like, why not? Eli, obviously, I'm not trying to play, but he might have a good game here. And then at running back, like Saquon, this is the matchup we've been waiting for. And I know Saquon's been a huge disappointment all year. I know because I own him in 2 leagues. But, like, if it's going to happen, this is where it's going to happen. So this is what you've been waiting for. If you have Saquon and you're still in it, you are obviously still rolling Saquon. This past week, Darius Slayton was really the huge benefactor of Eli. 8 targets, 5 catches, 154 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's getting targeted deep, and he's been leading the team in targets for a while. It's been easy to sort of ignore because, Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard are name values. But Darius Slayton right now is the number 1 wide receiver on this offense, and he's the one I would be playing. This past week, we saw Shepard get 4 catches for 28 yards and Tate get 1 catch for 11 yards. I know the target numbers aren't that different with 8 for Slayton, 7 for Shepard, and 5 for Tate. But look, that's still the most for Darius Slayton, and he's getting the highest value targets because he's getting them downfield. So if you are starting any New York Giants receiver this week, it should be Darius Slayton, particularly against the Dolphins defense that has been burned by receivers who go deep. The other news for the Giants is that Evan Ingram is expected back. And you might have been able to pick him up on your waiver wire. Maybe you were stashing him. He's an obvious plug and play. If you guys have situations that are a little bit more convoluted there, I'm trying to think of ones that might be a thing, but I can't think of anything right now. Again, I've had a couple beers. But if you guys have specific situations, please reach out to us. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, the website, whatever you need to do. Ask us. We'll let you know. All right. I am going to take the Dolphins to cover this because I am all in on Fitz and I really need it to happen. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break and I will be back with 4 more games to get you through the rest of the part 1 of the Week 15 preview.
Have you thought about trying sports betting but aren't sure how it'll go? Our friends at FanDuel are giving away a $50 sign-up bonus at letstalkfantasyfootball.com/FanDuel-Sportsbook.
Everyone's favorite, Nick Schreck, tomorrow night. So let's start with Chicago at Green Bay. We've got Green Bay as a 4.5-point favorite with the over-under of 40.5. So we don't really expect this to be a high-scoring game. That being said, Trubisky's really kind of been slinging the pig lately, and the Packers have not been as elite against the pass as they were early in the year. They've quietly dropped to 17th in pass DVOA from what was really a top 5 number early in the year. Trubisky also has run the ball 21 times over the past 3 weeks, including 10 times last week. So I think Trubisky's a better start than you would think off the bat, and I quietly think the Bears might win this game, but we'll get to that later. The Green Bay run defense has also been bad, so David Montgomery is a guy you should be starting. The issue here is that Tariq Cohen is really cannibalizing his work in the passing game. Despite Montgomery getting 15 to 20 touches each week, Cohen's getting around 50% of the snaps and about 6 targets a game over the past 4 weeks. So I think rather than giving himself fantasy value, what he's doing is taking away Montgomery's fantasy value. I still think Montgomery is a guy who should be played, but know what you're getting. You're getting a touchdown-dependent running back too. I mean, Montgomery might go over 100 yards just on the ground, but his pass game upside is close to nothing right now. So keep that in mind. Now, for Trubisky's pass-catching options, Taylor Gabriel and Javon Wims are both expected to miss. They've really done nothing at the tight end position, and I don't expect that to change. So it's really just Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller, as well as Tariq Cohen. Robinson, I think, surefire, roll him out there 100%. I'm not afraid of this Packers defense. I think, Jair Alexander was either a little overrated or has gotten a little hurt or a little banged up as the year has gone on. He's not really the shutdown corner that we thought he kind of was early in the year. And then Anthony Miller is just a guy who's going to be in the slot, seeing Tramon Williams, and probably just burning the shit out of him because Tramon Williams is 36. So, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty about it for both of these guys. I think you can roll them out there. Obviously, Robinson is the guy I would prefer. He's a guy who I think is a locked and loaded low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2. Miller's more on the 2-3 sort of consideration, leaning towards 3. For the Packers, I don't expect them to really try and get a huge volume of offense in this game. So I'm not rolling out Aaron Rodgers unless I need to. Another big thing is that Akeem Hicks, the Bears' star defensive tackle, is expected to return for this game. So while we've been attacking the Bears with the running game for a number of weeks going into this week, I think that stops right here because Akeem Hicks was the guy where when he got hurt, they started getting gashed in the running game. Now, who knows if he's back to normal, but I'm not buying that like Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are just going to run all over them. If you're going to play one of them, it's obviously Jones. He's getting more snaps. He got 22 touches last week compared to Williams' 7. And, I mean, he's clearly a guy that you need to start. But, I mean, his range of outcomes is so wide. And it's based a lot on touchdowns. But, he's a guy who can get you anywhere from 3 to, 29 points any given week. You just kind of got to hope for the best there. The guy that I think is the number 1 play on the Packers is Devontae Adams. Since he's returned, he's just dominated the target share. And despite a down week this past week, I'm not buying that it's going to continue. Still in on Devontae. I'm taking the Bears to cover. I'm taking the Bears to go into Lambeau and win this game. Seattle at Carolina. We have Seattle as a 6.5-point favorite with an over-under of 49. The big news here is that Rashad Penny tore his ACL this past week. And since Dontari Poe went down 2 weeks ago for the Panthers have been giving up over 7 yards per carry. So Chris Carson is one of the best running back plays of the week. If you've been riding Chris Carson and have gotten this far, consider yourself lucky because you are lined up for a fucking game. He's the guy in this matchup. He's the guy who's going to score all the points or who should score all the points. Now it's Carson, so who knows? We've been here before with Carson and it hasn't worked out, but there's no one behind him. To me, it's a no-brainer. It has to be him. And Russell Wilson, this is a game where they can ideally just give Carson the ball, let Wilson kind of be a game manager here and not make him be this guy who has to win games on his back like he is so often. So it's Chris Carson for me. I doubt you're sitting Russell Wilson, even though I don't think they're going to need to use him as much. And then in the pass game, DK is the only wide receiver with over a 12% target share over the past 4 weeks. So despite Lockett's reputation, he's been super banged up. I'm only comfortable rolling out DK Metcalf in the wide receiver core. The other guys behind him, Gordon, Turner, Moore. Gordon's leading them in snap percentage, but they've all kind of been rotating on and off the field. I don't think it's worth going down that far in a game where we expect the Seahawks to be able to just control the clock, use it with Chris Carson. Jacob Hollister has been very, very consistent. He hasn't been getting the tight ends over the past couple of weeks, but he's still getting, consistently about 6 targets. He's a guy that you should be playing, if you have been playing him. For Carolina, Kyle Allen has been a very bad real-life quarterback, while also being kind of a fantasy viable quarterback. So you could do worse as a streamer. Like, it's a good matchup, and we've seen him put up good numbers in the past couple of weeks. I mean, I'm choosing Fitzpatrick ahead of him for sure. There are probably a couple other guys that I would be streaming ahead of him, but be aware of it. The obvious guys here are McCaffrey and DJ Moore. They both have elite usage. McCaffrey got tackled on the one twice last week. So I think the stories of Christian McCaffrey's death this season are greatly exaggerated. And I think he might be all the way back this week. DJ Moore at this point is a wide receiver 1. You're not sitting him, And then Curtis Samuel pretty much stays a touchdown dependent wide receiver 3 in what should be a good matchup, but again, you need that touchdown for it to work. Ian Thomas, I think, is the big story here. He was a viable streamer last week. He ended up getting 10 targets, 5 catches, 57 yards, and a touchdown against the Falcons. This is another good matchup. I think out of him and Jacob Hollister, if Greg Olsen does not play, which I don't expect him to, then I'd rather be playing Ian Thomas than Jacob Hollister in this matchup. All right, I am going to take Carolina to cover and Seattle to win here. Moving on to New England at Cincinnati. New England is a 10-point favorite. The over-under is 41.5. So huge favorite with a low over-under. Not a lot of offense really expected here. We'll start with New England's side of the ball. James White has been the clear lead running back the past 2 weeks, but it's been in games that they've been losing. We don't expect that here, so I don't really know what to do. I'm not comfortable with any of their running backs. Yeah, throw it up in the air. I don't know. I really don't. I'm at a loss for words there. The only guy that I'm really comfortable with for New England is Julian Edelman. He had 12 targets this past week. The rest of the team has shown that Brady doesn't really trust them. So yeah, Edelman's the guy to play, and for me, that's about it. If you really need to go deeper at wide receiver, Myers and Sanu this past week were the next guys up. The week before, it was Myers and Dorsett. So Dorsett sort of had his usage go down for Sanu. I really can't recommend any of them. Just not something that I'm trying to do. This game in general has very, very little fantasy goodness because for the Bengals, the only guy that I'm trying to play is Joe Mixon. I mean, you could go after Tyler Boyd. He's gotten a decent amount of targets, but it's the Patriots. You would assume they'll be trying to scheme him out. And then John Ross is going to be healthy. I'm not trying to play him off a several weeks, most of the season-long injury. Auden Tate's on IR. Alex Erickson was never viable. So you're left with Joe Mixon, who has got 18-plus touches a game for the past 6 games. I don't think you can sit that kind of usage. I don't know that he is going to make good on it. But if Joe Mixon gets 18 touches and puts up a dud of a game, you can't hang your head for playing a running back who got 18 touches. And the Bengals have shown that they're willing to give him those touches, whether they are in the game, ahead in the game, be way behind in the game. This is who they are at this point in the year. They are just feeding Mixon. They're trying to run down the clock on the year. So play Mixon. Do not play any of your other Bengals. That would be my advice. It's a huge spread, and I'm still going to take New England. All right, last game that I got for you guys, Philadelphia at Washington. Philly is a 4.5-point favorite with an over-under of 39 points. Again, not many points expected here. I think the big story here is just how hurt the Philly offense is. Lane Johnson is hurt, their left tackle. The Carson Wentz's splits with and without him are very, very stark. And I apologize, I do not know whether he is expected to play this week. So I am looking it up for you guys right now. Johnson is supposedly week to week. So I don't like that shit. I don't like the Eagles' offense when he's out, and especially when almost the entire rest of the team is hurt. So their receiving core, Wentz, I know it's a good matchup. You don't need to play Carson Wentz here. You really don't. The receiving core right now, Aguilar has not practiced yet. Arcega-Whiteside is expected to play, and then you have Greg Ward and Robert Davis. You shouldn't play any of them. It's just not worth it. You should be playing both of the tight ends, though. Dallas Goedert has at least 6 targets in 4 straight games, and Zach Ertz has double-digit targets in 4 of his last 5. So these are both guys that you want to use because they're basically the only talented pass catchers that the Eagles have on the field right now. So Goddard, Ertz, highly recommend both of those guys. The other plays that we need to talk about are the running backs. Now, Miles Sanders has been heavily used for the past several weeks. This past week, he was used a little bit less because he got hurt. He was pulled out in the middle of the game. But Jordan Howard is expected to be back. Now, he was running as the lead back ahead of Sanders when he was healthy. Sanders has shown a little bit, so I would expect him to be used a little bit more. But I think in this matchup against Washington, you can use Howard as sort of the guy who you're hoping gets a touchdown. And I think you can use Sanders too, because with that skeleton crew of a receiver core, I would expect them to split Sanders out wide, try and get him involved in any way they possibly can. Doug Peterson's a smart coach. I don't think that they're going to force the ball to Greg Ward constantly and ignore Miles Sanders. So I think you can use both the running backs, both the tight ends, none of the wide receivers. We'll see how it really works out. For Washington, you're obviously not using Haskins. He's also a little bit hurt, so we'll see what happens there. But Darius Geis is out for the rest of the season. To me, it makes Chris Thompson maybe viable in this matchup. I would not bother going to Adrian Peterson because the Eagles' run defense has been pretty good. The guy that we need to talk about is Terry McLaurin. I think he's a viable start. The targets have been there pretty much. I know he had 4 2 weeks ago, but I believe it's been 7, then 4, then 12. He's a talented guy. He can get behind the defense. The Eagles, even with their cornerbacks healthy, I think I've overrated their defense a lot this year, and I apologize for that. McLaurin, to me, I think is a very viable start. The targets behind him at wide receiver have fluctuated between Steven Sims Jr. and Kelvin Harmon. I'm not trying to pick which one of these guys has a viable game. So stay away from that. Stay away from tight end. I think that's all you need to know. I'm going to take Philly to cover here. I'm going to take Philly to win. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me. Thank you for tuning in to the Week 15 preview, part 1 of it. Again, keep an eye out for part 2. There'll be 7 more games from the one and only Nick Schreck coming right at you, I believe, coming at you on Saturday morning. So thank you guys for being with me. If you do have questions, let us know via, all of the social platforms or the website, whatever you need to do. And, if you're in the playoffs, if you're doing what you're doing right now, then best of luck. Whatever we can do to help, we will try to. And go out there and bring home the bacon. All right, for Let's Talk Fantasy Football, I am Walsh. Later, podcast.
This has been Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Thanks for listening.